You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. I hope you are well on this day in April of 2024. I'm still working on Season 10 of Dakota Spotlight, but we're getting much closer, and I have some good news. This Friday, those of you who are Spotlight Plus subscribers will receive a bonus episode where I will reveal the name and give you a short preview of the new season. You'll also enjoy a first listen of the official trailer and several sound bites to give you a taste of what's coming. Also, keep in mind that once the season kicks off, Plus subscribers will be the first to access each new episode, now a full week before anyone else. Additionally, we've updated Spotlight Plus so that subscribers will now receive 2 episodes in the first week. Meanwhile, I'd like to share a short interview I conducted today with a very talented journalist, Trisha Taurinskas. She's just finished production of a podcast series I think you may like. It's called The Disappearance of Belinda Van Lith. Trisha does an excellent job of helping a family with their search for answers. After the following brief interview with her, I'll play the first episode of Trisha's podcast in full. Let's dive right in right now. Hey Trisha, how you doing?
I'm great, James. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since we talked. We were, until recently, colleagues at Forum Communications working in the Vault. And I'm happy to talk to you today about a stellar podcast that you have produced. I was lucky enough to hear about it over many months because you've been working on this a long time. It's a story of Belinda Van Lith. Can you just give us sort of the high level what this is about?
I've been working on this for a year now, starting in April. So to give you the background on Belinda, Belinda was a 17-year-old girl, and she went missing on June 15th, 1974 from her neighbor's house where she was house sitting. That house is located on Eagle Lake, which is just outside of Monticello, Minnesota. And to put that into perspective, that's about 45 minutes outside of the Minneapolis Twin Cities area. And what I thought was so interesting about her story was that there wasn't a lot of coverage about it at all. I dug through the archives and there weren't any newspaper articles from around the time she went missing. Nothing in the 70s, nothing in the 80s, nothing in the 90s, at least that I could find. The first story about her appeared in 2009 in the St. Paul Pioneer Press. I had a couple of questions about her, which was, why didn't they cover her? And what happened? Because in 2009, in that article, they name a main suspect. And so I thought, wait a second, there's no press coverage from 1974. And then in 2009, they have a main suspect. Something happened during that time that the public doesn't know about. And that really piqued my curiosity, yeah.
Like I said, I got to follow along a little bit, this whole thing. Well, what was the next step? You talked to the family, right?
Yeah, I called up Belinda's sister, Cindy, and first of all, I wanted to know more about Belinda because there was no coverage. And I also wanted to know how the family felt about her story being looked at closer. Because sometimes families don't want to relive the pain and agony, but sometimes they do want answers. And so I wanted to feel out how they were feeling. What I learned when I talked to Cindy, though, was that the family did want answers, and they were at a point in their lives where they were ready to dive into this. Obviously, this case happened 50 years ago, and it has affected their family in many ways. And they all kind of felt like, hey, it's been 50 years. We want answers. The next step was Cindy got a hold of her siblings. They all got together at her house, and I was able to go there. And what I learned was that they didn't know much. They weren't given updates in the case. They were really left in the dark. And investigators often don't give you much information. But they typically do share with the family as much as they can without compromising the investigation. So this was really bizarre to me. A family for 50 years who didn't know anything about what happened to their sister or the investigation that followed. So we all agreed that we wanted to pursue this. We wanted to pursue some answers. And I should say, prior to me going there, I did call the Wright County Sheriff's Office to see if they would answer some questions or give me any information at all. And they were not willing to do that, which is also bizarre because usually if we call an investigator, they'll at least maybe confirm some facts, so that we have it right for the story. This was really bizarre to me.
So it was just a hard no, right? Like, we're not sharing anything with you.
Yeah, I was shocked. I was really, really shocked. And so hearing that from the Wright County Sheriff's Office, and then also knowing that the family hadn't had any information and they were ready to get information, really was the beginning of this story. So we had a situation where the Wright County Sheriff's Office wasn't sharing anything with me, which means the public, and they weren't sharing anything with Belinda's family. And we were both not happy with that. So we kind of joined forces. I called the Wright County Sheriff's Office and said, we will be writing a story, but the story that I'm going to write now, and to clarify that, I write print versions of the story and then the podcast. But the story we're going to write now is one of a family who for 50 years has been kept in the dark and isn't being given any information about their sister. That's what I did on my end. And then the siblings went to the Wright County Sheriff's Office and said, look, we want answers. So the Wright County Sheriff's Office was in a bit of a situation, and they spent some time discussing what they were going to do. And they went to the family and said, how about this? We'll close out your sister's case. When we do that, the whole file will become public and we will share it with you, with the understanding that they'll be sharing it with Forum News Service and the Vault. And just to clarify too, just because the case is closed doesn't mean it can't be reopened with new information. So I think that's important too.
Okay, so you've talked to the family. They want to hear more about their sister's case. You talk to the sheriff, and eventually, with the family's help, you're getting access to the file. Or someone who got access to the file, police file first, the family?
It took a few months for the file to become available because it went to the county attorney for redactions, victims' names, and other information that wouldn't be public. In August, the family received the file. Lieutenant Mike Lindquist with the Wright County Sheriff's Office knocked on Cindy's door and handed over a flash drive. So she let me know that she got it, but again, wanted time to look it over, which is completely understandable. This is an emotional issue for them. When she put the flash drive in, she didn't know what to expect. It could have been a few pages, that kind of what they expected because they hadn't been given any update. It was a 1,200-page file that revealed a very intense investigation from 2008 to 2014, a lot of information about the main suspect in the case, and also all the reports from the initial investigation, which showed areas where they didn't follow up, and I would say critical errors. Cindy called me to come pick up the flash drive, and I went to her house, and this is something that I won't forget. When she opened the door, she was obviously very distraught, tears in her eyes, and she said, I wish we would have known, and I wish my mom would have known. Their mother passed away in 2014. Obviously, this was heartbreaking for her to lose a daughter and not know anything more, and for the whole family. They wish they had known sooner because, as Cindy told me, this file didn't just give them information, it also let them know that their sister wasn't forgotten. Someone was looking for her, and they didn't realize that. There was a lot of work done from 2008 to 2014, which I get into the podcast. But just to give a brief overview, the FBI was involved. There were multiple search warrants executed, cadaver dogs. There were land excavations. There were many searches in many areas. And all the while, the family was not too far away from where this was happening. They lived somewhere near that area still, and they didn't know. I should mention that after we found out that the Wright County Sheriff's Office was going to release the file, they just needed time to do the redactions. I started writing letters with the main suspect in the case, Timothy Crosby, who is civilly committed to the Moose Lake Sex Offender Treatment Program. Essentially, the state argued that he was a danger to society, that he was a dangerous sexual recidivist. And because he posed such a danger to society and women in particular, they involuntarily committed him indefinitely.
So you're corresponding with this guy who is basically in prison, right? And he's a main suspect in her disappearance.
Technically, it's not a prison, but the way that it operates is very similar to a prison. They are locked up. It's a secure facility. They do not have the rights that you and I have, or people on the outside of prison. So in a sense, it is a prison. But yeah, we started writing letters back and forth. And at first, I was just asking him about a letter that he wrote a judge that I found when I was rummaging around in the court documents for his civil commitment. And in that letter, he essentially said he didn't feel it was fair for him to be in there. So my first question was basically, do you still feel that way? And he responded that he did. And his argument as to why he didn't feel it was fair that he was locked up basically for life.
But you didn't mention Belinda at all in your first correspondence?
I didn't. And here's the thing though. If you're going to talk about why someone was civilly committed and why they disagree with their civil commitment, you have to look at what got them there in the first place. This man brutally sexually assaulted and kidnapped at least 3 women who escaped. One of them was 6 months after Belinda went missing. He is the main suspect, or I should say he's a suspect in 2 other murders, women who were dismembered and their remains were found in Wright County in the 1990s. And he's the main suspect in Belinda's case. There's more to the argument the state used to lock him up, but I knew that if I was going to talk with him in person, I was going to have to talk with him about his past crimes.
So another thing people need to hear, you went to the prison and met him in person and interviewed him.
I did. Yeah. So after we had corresponded for a while and after I had the investigative file, which included the police reports from the 3 women who escaped from him in 1974, 1983, and 1987, I put in a request to interview him in person. And in that request, I asked that it be recorded, and he agreed to those terms. A date was set through the Minnesota Department of Health and Human Services. And in early January, I went up there at 1:00 in the afternoon, set up 2 recorders, and spent 1 hour talking with him.
And the interview is obviously in the podcast if people listen, right?
Yeah, it's sprinkled throughout. It's a 7-part series. And in part 6, you really get the meat of the interview, a lot more of the interview. But yes, you do hear from Timothy Crosby throughout the series.
So we don't want to spoil anything, but did he reveal any new information?
He did. He did reveal new information that we didn't know before. And what he revealed answered a question the family had for a long time. It provided a little bit more clarity. I will also say that the way he answered questions was very interesting. It's hard to describe, but when you listen to this interview, I think you'll take away a lot just based on the way he answers questions.
So you got some new information from Crosby. Did you get any other new information while investigating this?
Yes, and I will say the people who were listening to this podcast really came through with providing me more information, reaching out. And there was at least one instance in which someone provided information that we actually handed over to the Wright County Sheriff's Office. The investigator requested that information. And that's really a testament to people getting involved and people caring. I think there were a lot of people who really cared about Belinda, who finally felt like we could maybe do something, at least get information out there, because if information isn't out there, it will never be, new information will never come to light. I mean, you have to start somewhere. And so that was rewarding, I think, because her family was also involved in that aspect of it all. And it was rewarding to at least hand over something new in this case.
Can you tell us why Timothy Crosby was a suspect in the first place?
Yes. When Belinda went missing, he was staying at his family's cabin alone, 100 yards roughly from where Belinda was house sitting. He was the last person to see her. Investigators interviewed him right after she went missing, and he said that she came to his house the day before looking for his sister. The reason people knew Belinda was missing was because she didn't show up to a family party, which was in the afternoon on June 15th, 1974. And Timothy Crosby that evening went unaccounted for. He then got his vehicle stuck in a field, in a manure pit, actually. And neighbors saw him the next morning around 3 or 4 a.m. out hosing off his vehicle. 6 months later, when he kidnapped a young woman in St. Paul and brought her and took her to that very cabin where he tied her up, sexually assaulted her repeatedly, and she escaped, that's when investigators thought, oh, wait, this could be our guy. But again, the family never knew that, and they lived just down the road.
I know you get into it obviously in your series, but could you just tell us like the 60-second or 90-second version of what you learned about Belinda? Who was she and what was she like?
Belinda was, from what I've heard, a really special person. She was kind. She was sweet. She helped out her neighbors, elderly people. She was kind to her siblings. She liked gardening. She was a good friend. I've had the opportunity to speak with her friends and obviously her family members, and they really all said she was such a bright light. And one thing that really stood out to me was when I asked her sisters, what do you think she'd be like today? And they all said she would have been something incredible. And that's heartbreaking, but it has been really an honor to get to know who Belinda was and what could have been. There are so many layers to the story and so many lessons to be learned. There is a man who was repeatedly allowed to be released and walk the streets to harm more women. And there's also the issue of how much information should be available to victims' families in situations like this.
And to the public, because you don't have to spoil it here, but due to a journalist's work, which happened to be a different reporter earlier, right? Information came out that helped the investigation initially.
The only reason anyone knew in 2009 that Timothy Crosby was a suspect and that he had the criminal history that he had was because the search warrant application that the Wright County Sheriff's Office and the St. Paul Police Department filed in 2009 to collect Crosby's DNA was discovered by a St. Paul reporter for the Pioneer Press. And in an ironic twist, as much as they tried to keep information away from the public, it was actually a newspaper article which told the public that Crosby was a suspect that led to his arrest in 2009 and ultimately to his civil commitment.
So, Trisha, thank you so much for joining us on Dakota Spotlight today. I'm going to play the full first episode of your series. Just thank you so much.
Thank you so much, James. You know how much I respect you and am a fan of Dakota Spotlight, so it means a lot to me to be here and to have this episode played.
Here is episode 1 of Trisha's podcast, The Disappearance of Belinda Van Lith.
She was very outgoing. She was very beautiful always. She's a very popular girl, very athletic, and she loved gardening. I mean, she had it made at home. She had nothing to run away from.
If they were doing stuff like that, more people should have known, because
The family should have known first.
I firmly believe that the more people that know information, somebody saw something somewhere, and whether it was a critical piece of information, it might have led to a critical piece of information.
I do stupid things when I was younger, yeah. Did I understand why I was doing them? No.
Did you kill Belinda? Did you kidnap her or have anything to do with her going missing? I first typed Belinda Van Lith's name into my notes 2 years ago. I was compiling a list of people who had gone missing over the years, cold cases to cover. But it wasn't until the spring of 2023 that I really started looking into Belinda's story. At the time, I didn't know a lot about Belinda. Newspaper archives included a few stories about her, with very basic information. Belinda was 17 years old when she went missing. She was last heard from on June 15th, 1974, and at the time she vanished, she was house-sitting for a neighbor on Eagle Lake, just outside of Monticello, Minnesota. From what I could tell, law enforcement initially suspected Belinda was a runaway. But after a while, they changed their tune and believed her disappearance was the result of foul play. Here's what really caught my attention. There was no media coverage in 1974, or even in the years that followed. It seemed Belinda's story hit the papers in the mid-2000s, when Wright County Sheriff's Office investigators connected her case to a suspected serial killer, Timothy Crosby, who is now locked up at a sex offender treatment facility in Moose Lake, Minnesota. That was quite a jump, from a complete lack of coverage to a main suspect in the case. Clearly, there was more to this story. What happened between 1974 and the mid-2000s that led investigators to so confidently determine Crosby was their guy? And maybe more importantly, what didn't happen during those silent years? That's what I set out to discover, and what led to the release of the investigative file for her family and for this story, all with some hope that someone out there might learn something about Belinda's investigation that could lead to answers. It's also what led me to a secured facility in Moose Lake, Minnesota, on a cold January afternoon, where I set up my recorder and 2 microphones and sat down face to face with that suspect, Timothy Crosby. You're listening to The Vault. I'm Trisha Taurinskas. I'm an investigative reporter with Forum News Service. This series is dedicated to the missing persons case of Belinda Van Lith and the investigation that followed. Belinda stood 5 feet 10 inches tall. She weighed around 110 pounds. She was pretty, with long, straight, light brown hair and blue eyes. She wore bib overalls and liked gardening.
She was very outgoing, and she was very beautiful always. You know, she was a very popular girl, very athletic, and she loved gardening, and all around a fun person to be with. Very smart, very bright.
That's Diane, Belinda's best friend from high school. I got in contact with her through Belinda's younger sister, Cindy. I first reached out to Cindy in the spring of 2023 to see if her family could provide any insight into Belinda's disappearance. And I wanted to learn more about Belinda.
She was somebody who really, really, really just loved everybody and was social, kind, helpful. Just really, she was a great sister. And we all just we really, really enjoyed her. She would always help you and do things for you. I mean, I just have so many good memories of that.
I also wanted to know if they were willing to be a part of this project because this is their story. Belinda is the victim in this story, yes, but her family members are too. They have been left behind to grieve a loss with no closure. They have walked through their lives with a missing piece, wondering where she had gone. Cindy reached out to her siblings and made arrangements for them to get together with me at her house, located in a suburb roughly 45 minutes northwest of Minneapolis, not too far from where Belinda went missing. Before I made the trip, I called the Wright County Sheriff's Office to gather whatever information they were willing to provide regarding Belinda's case. Reaching out to law enforcement is standard when covering missing persons and cold cases. Investigators don't often give away much information, but sometimes you ask the right question at the right time and they reveal a new piece of information. Or, at the very least, they'll confirm some critical facts in the case. That wasn't how it went with Wright County, initially.
Hi, you've reached Captain Eric Kunkel with the Wright County Sheriff's Office. Please leave a message after the tone.
Hey, Captain, this is Trisha Taurinskas calling with Forum News Service about the Belinda Van Lith case. Wondering if I could ask you a few more questions.
That's me leaving a voicemail for Wright County Criminal Investigations Division Captain Eric Kunkel. Shortly after leaving that voicemail, he called me back.
Hi, Tricia. Captain Eric Kunkel, Wright County Sheriff's Office, calling you back. At this point, there's nothing more I can release to you regarding your questions on a potential suspect and what currently is not public information is not public information. So if you have any questions, give me a call.
That did not sit well with me or Belinda's siblings.
Wendy, this is Trish. Hi, Trish.
Hi, Wendy. Nice to meet you. During my first visit to Cindy's, Belinda's siblings gathered around her kitchen table. It was covered with Belinda's yearbooks, drawings, keepsakes, and pictures from the time she was a baby until the time she went missing. Belinda's siblings were nice. They were funny and kind. It was almost hard to believe their childhood had been darkened by the loss of their sister and the decades of grief and mystery that followed. We spent that first hour talking about what they remembered about the investigation that followed Belinda's disappearance. It turned out there wasn't much to remember. Belinda's brother and sister recall Wright County Sheriff's deputies knocking on their door in the mid-2000s, requesting saliva swabs to create a DNA profile for Belinda. I learned that was around the time a new detective was assigned to the case, Wright County Sheriff's Lieutenant Mike Lindquist. But that was about it. Investigators didn't question the siblings or ask them to participate in the investigation beyond that. They never have. For nearly 50 years, her siblings were not asked critical questions. They didn't receive briefings from law enforcement. There were no regular updates. They were, for the most part, kept in the dark. They believe the silence was the result of a stalled investigation that never went anywhere. I left Cindy's house that day and called Captain Eric Kunkel again.
Hi, Captain. This is Trisha Taurinskas calling with Forum News Service again. Since my last call to you, I did meet with Belinda Van Lith's family, a group of her siblings actually, and you know, they were pretty frustrated with your decision to not share any information. I'm sure you're aware that they have not been kept in the loop throughout the years and have a lot of questions. And, you know, seeing as though this is a 50-year-old case, they're just looking for closure, some information, and just to be respected. Obviously, this case is very old and they have a lot of questions. Now, I know in your voicemail you said you weren't willing to share anything. Again, I'd like you to reconsider if you could answer a few questions that I have. I understand you don't want to compromise the integrity of the investigation, but answering some pretty basic questions would even be helpful. And, because at this point, the story that I'm going to write is that there is a family who has who doesn't have any answers, hasn't been kept in the loop, and after 50 years are being denied any information. So hopefully we can change that and write a story about, Belinda, what happened to her, and hopefully, the hope with making these stories public is that if there is somebody out there who knew something, maybe they're approaching the end of their life or whatever it is, where they would feel like they want to come forward with some valuable information.
Belinda's siblings did the same. Within days, Lieutenant Mike Lindquist, who works alongside Kunkel, agreed to release the file to the family with the knowledge that they'd be sharing the file with Forum News Service. Before Lieutenant Mike Lindquist handed it over to Belinda's siblings, though, the file had to go through a series of redactions with the county attorney to protect victims' names and information. After 4 months of waiting, the file was ready in mid-August. Lieutenant Mike Lindquist drove to Cindy's home and handed over a USB flash drive. Inside were the long-awaited contents of her sister's case file. There's something almost mysterious about a flash drive, a lightweight piece of technology that fits in the palm of your hand, composed of plastic, rubber, and metal. Unlike a wrapped gift, its exterior or weight gives no indication of what's inside. And then there's that moment when you plug it into a computer's USB drive, click, and open its contents. For Cindy, that moment, that click, revealed more than 1,200 pages of investigative files, pictures, police reports, interview transcripts, search warrants, aerial maps, details regarding excavation digs, bone samples, and suspect lists, spanning decades. Each page, each piece of the file, existed for one purpose: to find out what happened to her sister, Belinda. I received word from Cindy in late August that the family was ready to share the file. When I arrived at Cindy's, I was greeted by her and her niece, who had printed off the entirety of the file. There it sat, a large, heavy, 3-ring blue binder filled to the brim with documents. What was even more memorable than that big blue binder, though, was Cindy's reaction. She had tears welling up in her blue eyes. She said she and her family had no idea that this much work went into the quest to find out what happened to her sister. She wished they had known sooner, and most importantly, she wished their mom, Beverly, knew too, because that case file revealed more than just information, facts, and interviews. It showed that Belinda wasn't forgotten. Their father, Clifford, died in 1998 following injuries from a car accident. Their mother, Beverly, passed away in 2014. Before we dive into the contents of the case file, I want to take you back to the summer of 1974, around the time Belinda went missing, in the rural community that surrounded Eagle Lake on the outskirts of Monticello, Minnesota. There were 2 types of people in the area at that time: those who lived there year-round, and those with summer homes, cabins, who came up only when the weather was worthy. They'd typically winterize and close up their cabins for the colder months, and when spring and early summer came around, they'd do just the opposite: air out the cabin, maybe clean out a mouse trap or 2, and put the dock in the water. Belinda's family lived there year-round. Clifford and Beverly had 8 children. They grew up on a farm that was full of laughter and plenty of love. Here's Diane.
She had a life that a lot of us envied out there on the farm, and a big family and a lot of freedom. And
each summer, the neighborhood grew to accommodate the seasonal crowd, which added a fun new mix of friends and acquaintances, and even added babysitting jobs for the teenage girls. The area was, for the most part, safe. The Van Lith kids came and went, sometimes riding horses to and from friends' houses. Other times they roamed around on foot, skipping off to swim or hang with friends. Life seemed more relaxed. So when Belinda took a house-sitting job for a neighbor a quarter of a mile down the road, nobody in the family thought much of it. It wasn't out of the ordinary or frowned upon. It was simply a way to make some cash and help a neighbor out. Looking back, though, Belinda's siblings do wonder why Belinda was house-sitting for Dwayne Cornwell, a single musician in his 30s.
Because I don't ever remember that we had any family interaction with him.
No.
Anybody in the family. So how did he know that I had a 17-year-old sister that would house sit? Mm-hmm. How did he know that? Well, that's the part I don't understand.
Dwayne had gone off to Nashville with his band early that summer, which is why Belinda was there. The investigative file revealed 2 possible answers as to why Belinda was needed. Dwayne had chickens, which needed to be looked after to a certain extent. He also had a tumultuous relationship with an ex-wife who had, at the time, recently moved out. In an interview conducted years later, Dwayne told investigators Belinda was there to make sure his ex-wife didn't come take his property. At the time she was house-sitting, though, not even her father, Clifford, seemed alarmed or concerned. The cabin was just down the road, and the Van Lith kids regularly stopped over to visit with Belinda. Wendy, who was 9 at the time, even almost stayed the night with her big sister around the time she went missing. Here's Wendy.
The day that we went, Mom said, come home. I wanted to stay.
She wanted you to stay overnight, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Mom had me come home because we were going to the rodeo or going to the
Buffalo
parade or something like that. And that was that Thursday?
Probably Thursday or
Friday.
Well, the parade is always on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm. So that would have been Friday that I had been there.
Clifford had also been over to Dwayne's house around that time. Belinda called her dad on June 13th, 2 days before she went missing. She complained to him that she was hearing noises. She thought a fuse had gone out. Clifford went there that night. He didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Belinda didn't seem at all distressed or concerned. The fuse did need repair, but he didn't have the necessary tools on him. The next day, June 14th, he went to the house and fixed the fuse. Belinda wasn't around, but that wasn't unusual. There was plenty for a 17-year-old girl to do around Eagle Lake. Family members assumed she went down to the lake, and maybe she had. On Saturday, June 15th, Belinda didn't show up to her sister's going-away party. Pam, the oldest sibling, was going off to Texas to join the Air Force. It was a big deal. The oldest Van Lith was leaving the nest, and so their parents hosted a party at their home. There was no reason for Belinda's family and friends to suspect anything was wrong with her at first. There were no family conflicts among Belinda and her siblings or parents. It was out of the ordinary, but they assumed she'd eventually stroll into the party wearing her warm smile. Her friend, Diane, who you heard from earlier, later told investigators during a 2008 interview that she spoke to Belinda on Friday night, June 14th. Diane didn't recall anything bizarre about that night or their conversation, only that Belinda had mentioned swimming in the lake that day with a boy from the neighborhood. In the days following Belinda's disappearance, another friend told investigators they spoke to her the following morning. According to the file, Belinda woke up to the phone ringing. Her friend, Debbie, was on the other end of the line. Belinda made plans to give her friend a pair of earrings later that day. On that same day, Dwayne returned home from his trip to Nashville. When he pulled in, he saw his mom was already there. She found the door was open, yet Belinda was nowhere to be found. Her belongings were still there, though. Shortly after, Belinda's parents also learned that their daughter wasn't there. Clifford spent June 16, 1974, Father's Day, and his birthday, trying to find his daughter. Law enforcement began their official investigation on Monday, June 17th. Officers didn't find anything valuable missing from the home where Belinda was house-sitting. Duane had a collection of expensive instruments, but they were all still there. Belinda's clothing and personal items were still scattered throughout the room where she was staying. Her bib overalls were crumpled up on the ground in the corner. Her makeup was scattered alongside the nearby bathroom sink, along with her class ring. Cornwell did report some suspicious circumstances to officers, though. One pink chenille blanket was missing. Later reports would mention the possibility of a butcher knife being missing, too. Officers also noticed a 20-inch square cut out of the screen with a sharp instrument near the back porch of the house. Officers noted that, quote, entry had not been made through the window, though they didn't indicate why they made that observation. Her parents checked through her things and discovered her wallet with identification was left in her room, along with all of her clothing and jewelry. The only thing that wasn't there was a signature item she always wore, a troll necklace with a leather strap. At the request of the family, law enforcement searched around Duane's residence. Nothing suspicious was discovered. It should be noted, though, that the search did not include the lake, nearby property, or surrounding farm fields. Investigators also looked into Duane. Kind of. Duane told investigators he and a bandmate stayed at the Scottish Hotel during their time in Nashville before checking out on the evening of June 14th and making the 14-hour drive back to his home on Eagle Lake. Yet, when investigators checked into his claim, they noticed an inconsistency. A teletype returned to the Wright County Sheriff's Office stated that Duane checked out on June 13th, along with his bandmate. That means June 14th was unaccounted for. That seemed to be good enough for investigators, though. They noted in the report that there was a clearance of Cornwell at that time. And just like that, law enforcement dropped their suspicion that foul play was likely. They ended the police report by stating that she likely left willingly with someone she knew. The case was seemingly closed. Yet just 6 months later, investigators would be hit with a major twist in the case. In late December 1974, Timothy Crosby kidnapped a 19-year-old young woman in St. Paul. He took her to his cabin on Eagle Lake, roughly 100 yards from Duane Cornwell's residence. And when Wright County Sheriff's Office investigators learned that Timothy Crosby had taken a victim to his cabin, where he violently tied her up and sexually assaulted her, they realized they spoke with him 6 months earlier when officers knocked on his cabin door days after Belinda went missing and asked him if he had seen her. The thing is, he had. Timothy Crosby was actually the last person to see her. You've been listening to The Vault, a Forum Communications podcast. This series is dedicated to the missing persons case of Belinda Van Lith and the investigation that followed. Tune in next week for part 2. In the meantime, dive into images related to this case at inforum.com/thevault. That's where you'll find a photo of Belinda wearing the troll necklace we mentioned earlier. This is the first time, to our knowledge, that an image of that necklace has been shared with the public. Hopefully, someone out there might know something about where that necklace was located or where it was found that could lead to answers. This series is written, narrated, and produced by me, Trisha Taurinskas. The Vault's editor is Jeremy Fugelberg.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Trisha Taurinskas. Check out her podcast titled The Vault. You can get it anywhere podcasts are found or at inforum.com/podcasts. Thank you for your patience as I continue to work on Season 10. And don't forget, Plus subscribers will get a nice preview of Season 10 this Friday. The website for this show is dakotaspotlight.com. Thank you so much for listening. I'm James Wollner, and I'll see you next time.